I'm very excited today to hear from Elyssa Friedland. The other thing that makes this such a stellar series is having Rabbi Shankman do these marvelous Q&A conversations with our authors. I can't imagine what it would be like if we didn't have her asking the thoughtful questions, teasing things out for us that we'd wondered about as we read these books. So thank you to Bonnie, Mara, and Rabbi Shankman. And of course, a big thank you to Elyssa, and thank you to all of you who've joined us today. So with that, I'm gonna be quiet, make sure everybody stays muted, and look forward to hearing more from the author and less from me.
Thank you, Lori.
Sure.
So it's great to see everybody. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Sue Shankman, and I want to thank you all for being here. I'm excited that we're able to bring you this program through our partnership with the Jewish Book Council. I am going to put a link in the chat to Elyssa's book, to this book. You can also then, once you're in there, go and look for her other books as well. Hopefully that's the right link. It goes through our mitzvah mall, and encourage you, if you have not already read the book, to please be sure to purchase a copy and to read it. But hopefully, I'm sure that after our time together today, that you're going to be inspired to pick it up and read it. So again, thank you to the Jewish Book Council, and I'm thrilled to welcome our author today, Elyssa Friedland. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to have a chance for her to share a bit about her book. I'm thrilled to introduce this afternoon's author, Elyssa Friedland, who is the author of 4 novels and a forthcoming picture book. She attended Yale University, where she served as managing editor of the Yale Daily News, and is a graduate of Columbia Law School. She worked as an associate at a major firm before turning to writing full-time. Recently, she has taught a course at Yale called Contemporary Novel Writing. Her work has been published in the Washington Post, McSweeney's, LitHub, Pop Sugar, RealSimple.com, Bustle, Modern Bride, New York Magazine, Columbia Journalism Review, CBS MarketWatch.com, et cetera, Yale Alumni Magazine, and more. Elyssa resides in New York City with her husband and her 3 children, and I know she has one is at home with her currently. We're so excited to talk to you today about your most recent book, Last Summer at the Golden Hotel, which was both a Good Morning America Buzz Pick and a Book of the Month selection. One of the things that I would definitely encourage you to do, and I will put it in the chat as well, is to go to Elyssa's website. You'll learn lots about her. Among the things that I love learning is that she loves wine, ice cream, both things that I love as well, forensic files, and texting her friends obsessively. So Elyssa, we are delighted to welcome you to the Literary Club of the Women of Washington Hebrew Congregation, and we look forward to hearing about your book. Again, if others would like to ask questions, please send them to me in the chat. And I know this is, as we already started sharing, this is in some ways a walk down memory lane for many of us as we go back to the Catskills. And a reminder again to please remain on mute. And if you can try not to hit the share screen button I might be able to disable that. But I don't want to disable it for everyone because I need Elyssa to be able to share her screen. So we're going to hear a bit from Elyssa, and thank you so much for being here on this very cold day.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation to speak to this group, and I wish we could gather in person, but I know this is the next best thing. I hope everyone is feeling healthy right now. I have my little one home. He's not sick. He's 8. The elementary division in his school didn't have enough teachers to open the school today, so he's home with me, but hopefully he's occupied. So I wanted to share slides. I don't normally, when I do book talks, share slides, but because the Catskills, the pictures are so incredible, and this really is in some ways historical fiction, I want to share a slide presentation with you that I think will be very entertaining and also really set the mood and, pull on your nostalgia heartstrings. So I'm going to share right now. Okay. So the first 3 slides are just postcards and promotional posters from the Catskills that were popular during the height of the Borscht Belt. And this one, I think is really fun. It's beautifully illustrated, and I know you have to have amazing vision to be able to make out some of the smaller font, but you can see the Monticello Raceway is here, Brown's Hotel, Sullivan's, so many famous, the Apollo Plaza, like so many of the famous places in the Catskills are visible on this map. And then actually over to the left is a place called Villa Roma, which I don't know if many are familiar with, but that was actually an Italian owned hotel that catered to Italian Americans. And I learned while I was researching the Catskills that there were other ethnic enclaves in the area, not just Jews. And there was like a Polish area, an Italian area, a Greek area, although I'm not sure any were quite as large as the Jewish area. Another funny postcard from the time, I love that it says pretty girls in the top left. I laugh at the good hunting because I don't think that's really appealing to the Jews. It's like, we're not much in the way of hunters, but that, this also shows that like there was a wider range of people going to the Catskills. But I just think this is so adorable and well illustrated that I wanted to share it. And the Catskills really are beautiful. And I went a few times. First I went as a child, but then, later on for book research, which I'll talk about. So I just want to share some historic photos from the Catskills. This picture is from the Flagler Hotel. And I just love the vibrancy of the red, of the waiter, and then also of this woman's skirt, and the fact that the woman seated is wearing a mink stole in what's, I'm sure, the summertime, as you can see from the way everyone else is dressed. And I love that. I mean, people were dressed to the nines when they went out for drinks and dinner in the Catskills in a way that obviously things are so different now. And there are very few places that you can't wear jeans to these days. And obviously this was a very different time. This is a picture from dinner at Grossinger's. And on the left is Jenny Grossinger. And the woman to her right, the brunette, is the actress Bess Meyerson. Again, you see the men are in tuxedo for dinner, which is, to me, just wild. And certainly by the time I went to the Catskills in the late 80s and early 90s, there was no dressing for dinner and we were all in our most casual clothing. Jenny was amazing. And really, if you picked one person, I would say, to be the face of the Catskills and the Borscht Belt, it would be Jenny Grossinger, which is so incredible. The hotel was started as a boarding house by her parents, by her father, and then she really went and took it over and was the public face and was amazing at harnessing connections with famous people to increase the prestige of the hotel and bring them as guests and as entertainers. And the most fortuitous thing that happened to me while I was researching the book was getting to meet her daughter-in-law completely by happenstance in New York City. For a year, I was going to a Pilates gym and I had a personal trainer there, and I had a Thursday session at 12, and a much older woman who appeared to be in her 90s, which was true, was there at the same time, also having personal training. And I knew her name was Bunny, and that's all I knew about her. And we had the same session time. And then this went on for a year, and we used to exchange pleasantries, and she was always like, just seemed like a very sweet person. And then one time she didn't come. And I happened to, at this point, I've written probably half of my draft of this book. And I happened to say to my trainer, "Oh, where's that older woman that's always here?" And she's like, "Oh, she's okay. She just had a doctor's appointment. She'll be back. But do you know who that is?" And my trainer's eyes lit up, and I was like, "I have no idea who that is." She's like, "That's Bunny Grossinger. Have you ever heard of Grossinger's Hotel?" And I mean, my jaw dropped. I was like, not only have I heard of it. I have 200 pages of a manuscript right now of a novel that is set in the Borscht Belt. She's like, oh, you have to talk to her. So, you know, the introduction was made, and I ended up going to Bunny's apartment. Bunny just passed away actually like a month ago. There were several beautiful obituaries in the major newspapers because she was such an incredible woman. Bunny was Jenny Grossinger's daughter-in-law, and she married Jenny's son young and raised her children at the hotel. So she was the most perfect person to speak to, because if you've already read my book, you know it's not just about the Catskills experience. It certainly is, but it's also about owning a family business and what is it like to be the owner of the hotel, not just, you know, someone who has affinity for it. And so I went to Bunny's apartment 3 times. We had extremely long conversations. She was sharp as a tack. And then she ended up handing me her cousin's unpublished memoir, another Grossinger, who just spilled like all the dirt in this and talked about who hated who and who thought who was a bad businessman and who thought who was stealing money and who was sleeping with who and who had a bad marriage and a good marriage and the good years in the hotel and the bad years in the hotel. And it was like really like the true life version of the Golden Hotel. And I don't know why the memoir remained unpublished. Maybe she just didn't want everyone to stop speaking to her in the family, but it was the most entertaining manuscript. And I wouldn't say that it totally informed my writing of the book, because I'd already written so much at that point, but it really confirmed my world building that I had done, and that I had accurately depicted the Catskills and also the complications of a family business. So here's Jenny Grossinger again, in between Eddie Fisher and Elizabeth Taylor, who famously got married at the hotel. And then this is a picture from Kutcher's hotel, and on the left is the NBA superstar Wilt Chamberlain, who worked as a bellhop at Kutcher's for a summer. And I don't know if this is like a short Jew or he's just an incredibly tall man, but the height difference between these two is just amazing. I love this picture. And I think before we started, I heard somebody talking about the Olympics, the swimming training going on in the Catskills. And that's just one example of like a huge professional sports history in the Catskills. The Mets practiced there every summer for years, and Kutcher's in particular was known for bringing tremendous athletic talent to the hotel, and the athletes would train there for free and then interact with the guests. And of course, that dazzled all the children who wanted to meet these athlete celebrities. So it was mutually beneficial. So this is the ballroom in the Nevele Hotel. My parents honeymooned at the Nevele. They're not the only ones. I don't know. I'd be curious if anyone knows why, but the Nevele seems to have been the honeymoon destination. I don't know why that hotel in particular, but it was, you know, over the course of, let's see, my book's been out now for about 8 months, and I've done a lot of book talks, and I hear over and over, we had our honeymoon at the Nevele, my parents had their honeymoon at the Nevele, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then this is an artist that I met through a friend who did this beautiful watercolor rendering of the Golden Hotel. And it's in black and white in the book. And I just wanted to give readers a sense of the scale, because, you know, not all of my readers are familiar with the Catskills, the Borscht Belt, and really understand. I mean, it helps, of course, to have the quote from Dirty Dancing in the beginning of the book that I have. And also, you know, in so much of the marketing of the book, Dirty Dancing was talked about, which is also, you know, terrific, because I think it's important that for readers who have no familiarity with this area, that they have some sense of like the proportions and what type of property I'm describing. So I'll do some quick before and afters of some of the big hotels. This is the swimming pool at Grossinger's, obviously in the evening, but you can see how beautifully maintained, and the wood is, you know, sparkling, and every chair is perfectly lined up and even, and the water is, you know, very clean and well tended. And then this is that same swimming pool after the hotel closed, and the hotel was closed for several decades before the buildings were cleared. So it's really just so sad. The carcass, essentially, like there were over 500 hotels in the area, and while some of them were sold and new things built on the premises, that was really not the case for most of them. And so this is really what happened over decades, just graffiti. And you see these three, those, I mean, you can recognize the chairs, like those are the chairs. They're sitting in the middle of the pool. Like, I'm sure people came and took some of the furniture for themselves when the hotel first closed. I know there were auctions of some of the memorabilia, but for the most part, the buildings were left to rot, which is really sad. And many of these pictures were captured by a photojournalist named Marissa Scheinfeld, who has a fabulous book called The Borscht Belt. And she grew up in the Catskills, and her father worked in the hotels his whole career. And she went and took these unbelievable pictures of the remains of the Borscht Belt. And so this is from her book. And this is the coffee shop at Grossinger's as it was left. This is a guest room at Kutcher's. Kutcher's was the last of the Borscht Belt hotels to close. And if you're interested, there's a fabulous documentary called Welcome to Kutcher's that has a lot of interviews with members of the Kutcher family and talks about very honestly how they couldn't maintain the hotel anymore. And they tried very hard to keep it relevant and to keep it occupied. But as the Catskills declined in popularity, they couldn't hold on any longer. So here's a guest room, also from Marissa's book, A Guest Room at Kutcher's. But Kutcher's is one of the ones that was bought, and a new property sits there now. This is the Y1 Yoga and Wellness Retreat. And the land was purchased by an Indian billionaire who built this meditation and yoga hotel retreat. I always laugh that this is what's on the site. Kutcher's, like I said, is the hotel that I have personal experience with, where I went with my family. And I like to say, I loved going to the Catskills because my parents would never let me get my own dessert when we went out for dinner. I always had to share food or whatever, and they didn't think I'd finish anything, and I couldn't get a soda, but then everything was included in the Catskills. So I could get unlimited desserts and eat as much as I wanted when I went there. And I just think it's so funny that on the grounds of the place where people ate and easily gained 5 pounds in a week when they went there is now this wellness place that has a full vegan menu, and nobody is ordering seconds of apple strudel, and babka. So this is the Concord. And here's the Concord during demolition. And then this is what's on the site of the Concord now, which is Resorts World Casino. And for those of you who have read my book, you know that the Golden Hotel receives an offer to sell to a casino operator, which was inspired by the true story of the Concord. And then this is taken from New York Magazine, which in October of this past year had an article about how the Catskills are coming back, and it had a list of 9 hotels that are being opened in the next few years in the Catskills with super high price tags, over $1,000 a night. Major hotel operators are betting on the Catskills having a revival, although certainly it will be of a very different nature than what the Borscht Belt was. I just, of course, love the iconic image of the lift from Dirty Dancing, which is one of my favorite movies, of course. And I like to show the picture because not, for obvious reasons, obviously this is was a big source of inspiration and helped me understand the Borscht Belt, more. There's only so much, when people tell you stories, but of course, a visual representation is great. But I like to show this also when I do book talks, because what intrigued me about Dirty Dancing is how few people, if they aren't Jewish, realize that this is a Borscht Belt hotel and that the guests at the hotel are meant to be Jewish. When I have shared that with my friends from college, none of whom are Jewish, they had absolutely no idea. And that led me to look up interviews with the screenwriter who talked about how this was a Jewish movie, but only if you knew. It's like Inside Baseball. If you knew, you knew. And if you didn't know, it was just a story about a wealthy girl falling for her lower class dance instructor and a family away on vacation. But you didn't understand the larger context of where that hotel, Kellerman's, fits into history. I hope many of you got to see the second season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. There were 3 episodes shot in the Catskills at the fictitious Steiner Resort. I thought these episodes were amazing. I loved every second of them, and the wardrobe was amazing. Everything about it, I think they really nailed it, and I really enjoyed that. I'll just start moving more quickly so we have time for questions. This is just a beautiful artist rendering of the Weingolds and the Goldman families, and it's fun. It's on my website. It's fun if you've read the book to try to identify who's who. It's not that hard. And then the family trees, which are also printed in the beginning of the book, because there are a lot of characters to keep track of, and I know it's useful for many readers to be able to go back and say, like, was that a Goldman, a Weingold, and which generation are they in? It's just a picture of this is the Welcome to Kutcher's, the last Catskills resort. I recommend that documentary. Just a picture of borscht, because I had never eaten borscht or made borscht, and I decided to do it during the pandemic since I had never tried it before. And the picture on the right is my daughter and I doing goat yoga, because that's very popular in the Catskills of today, the hipster modern Catskills. This is my new book cover, and it's going to be out September 6th. I'm very excited about it. It's about 4 women who reunite at their 25th high school reunion, and life has really not gone according to plan for them, and they try to right the ship of their lives in middle age. And this is a picture book that I wrote that is coming out next year as well. I'm new to the picture book world, so I don't know anything about the marketing or what the business is like, so that'll be interesting. Wrapping up, if you enjoyed the book, I encourage you to leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads. Very helpful to authors when reviews are left. And it only takes a minute. And then finally, if you're interested in keeping in touch and keeping up with my books and life in general, these are my handles on Instagram and Facebook, and then my website at the bottom. I'm very accessible and love to chat with readers. So that's it.
So thank you, Elyssa. And I'll put it again in the chat, but I did put your website in there so people can see. I loved, and I know, I think it's at the front of the book too. Yeah, the family trees, so that you can keep track of all the characters. But I also loved some of the inspiration that you shared, including the borscht recipe. I grew up actually having borscht. Didn't love it as a kid, but maybe we'll try it again. My husband loves beets, so maybe there's something there. I wanted to share one of the things that I loved was that, it opens with that, the Dirty Dancing reference. And a couple of years ago, we were going to a national park and hiking in West Virginia, my husband and I had to make a pilgrimage to Pembroke, Virginia, which is where Mountain Lake Lodge is, which is the site where they actually filmed Dirty Dancing. Which it looks different today, but sort of had that same feel. And I know for so many who are here, sort of these references to the Catskills and places that we may remember, and if not from going with family, maybe even summer camp. I spent a couple summers, a week or 2 weeks at a camp in the Catskills at Ashokan. But it's this nice, wonderful connection. And I know we began, a number of people were sharing some of those reminiscences of those days and those experiences. So I wanted to get that we have a couple questions in the chat, and then I wanted to get to some of our other questions that we also have as well. The first one is about the Nevele and what's the significance of the number 11 in the Nevele name.
I learned that last night. I did a book talk with a synagogue in Boca last night, and they said one woman brought that up, and Nevele is 11 backwards, and there were apparently 11 brothers. So I guess 11 brothers in the family that started it.
Oh, wow. And then another is that in the first picture you showed, I think that was a picture at, I don't know. I guess the one where Bess Meyerson was. Next to the gentleman on the other side is Betsy something.
Palmer. Not plumber, Palmer. She was
Okay.
popular, big star in the
Oh, okay. All right. That's good to know.
Late 50s, early 60s. She was on What's My Line?
Okay.
Darlene Francis. It shows you how old I am.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the book itself. You know, it's we have these two successful families, or this successful hotel, and then we come to the next generation, and there is a sense of searching or figuring out, you know, this the next steps, and I'm curious, you know, I'm curious where whether any of the characters were, I don't want to, not necessarily based on your own family, but where did the storyline come from in terms of thinking about, I know as we talk about the Catskills and all of these hotels, and then when we look today at this culture that has really disappeared in many respects, I know there is a comeback. Some say that's due to COVID and people wanting to escape the city again. But this challenge that I think has been a conversation about the success of one generation, and then what happens when the next generation chooses to go in a different direction. And thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
I got really interested writing about multi-generational issues from the book that I wrote before last summer at the Golden Hotel, which is called The Floating Feldmans. And that's a Jewish family. That book is about a Jewish family, 3 generations that go on a cruise for the grandmother's 70th birthday. And it's another big cast, multiple point of view. And I just really fell in love with writing about the way the generations interact and some of the misunderstandings. And I really believe like no one is correct. Like there's not one way to live life, and it's not necessarily better to be in the Catskills playing cards than it is to have, you know, go to a place where you take a lot of pictures for Instagram. Like I think there's merit to everything. And I mean, in my own life, I see it where my parents, like, and my parents, my in-laws definitely look down on all the social media, and that I'm always on my phone, and my husband and my kids, but there's so much good that can come out of it also. I just was away over the winter vacation, and I posted a picture of my family. We were in Costa Rica, and then someone reached out to me and said, my sister's in Costa Rica. We happen to be at the same hotel. And then, you know, we ended up spending the entire vacation with this other family. That's the kind of thing that could never happen, you know, before social media. Like it's not all just about, you know, this narcissistic showing off, you know, what you're doing, or, you know, the minutia of your daily life. So, and also like as a creative person, I love the expression that social media offers. Like it takes a lot to write a book, and it's a lot of effort, and it's a lot to get to the publishing stage, you know, but to throw up a funny picture, a funny post takes all of 5 seconds, and there's no barrier to entry. And it's just like an easy way to be creative personally. And I just love, you know, like family dynamics. If you take the social media piece out of it, like family dynamics are inherently interesting. They're inherently complicated. And when you write a book with a big sweeping cast, and you have men and women and people of all different ages and backgrounds and jobs, like your reader can almost always find someone to identify with, which I really like, because I think that makes the reading experience really deeply pleasurable if you can sort of see, and often you see parts of yourself in the different characters. And then The Floating Feldmans was so much fun for me to write. I knew I wanted to do something similar for my next book, but obviously didn't want to repeat myself and just do another 3 generations away on a different vacation. And so I sat a lot with my editor and my agent, and we talked about what would be the next logical step. And I realized that by having 2 families, well, I wanted to introduce a business, because I think as complicated as families are, then when you introduce a business, that adds an entire extra layer of intrigue and complication. And I was definitely right, you know, and when profits are involved and people's livelihood and their identity is so bound up in what they do, then you have so much more material to work with. And then it was really important to me to have 2 families. One, it also, having 2 families co-own the hotel not only enabled me to explore complicated friendships and long-term friendships, and how sometimes like the older generation gets along great and then the younger generation doesn't. And that's, as simple as like sometimes even on a very micro level, that could be, I have a really good friend that's a fellow parent in school, but then our children aren't getting along in school. And like that can really be a minefield. And so, but also by having two families, then I was able to introduce romance between the families and, explore those issues. So it just opened up more opportunity for me. And then as far as like the setting, it's hard to even pinpoint the moment where I realized I wanted to set it in the Catskills, but I'm glad, because it is like, it's a rich setting with tons of history. You don't have to look too far to get great stories, but it certainly typifies the way things have changed over the generations. And nostalgia is very powerful. Like readers really, really respond to nostalgia, I found. So it was good, like even just for the success of the book.
And I know you said that you did some research and you went to the Catskills as you were writing. And so I'm assuming since it was probably during COVID or early, you probably took your family, your kids. What was their reaction to the Catskills, and how much of it was, was there enough left in terms of your own experiences growing up, places you had gone that you could show them? And what was their reaction and sense of connection to the Catskills?
Well, actually, I nodded, but I did go to the Catskills. I did not. I only went with my husband, because the Catskills of today, it's very different. I went with him. It was really for work. And so I think there are some lovely hotels, and they would have had fun. And we went to this one hotel called Scribner's Catskill Lodge, which is probably like maybe among the nice, if not the nicest hotel in the area now. And we talked a lot to the owner, who is Jewish and has Catskill roots, and was like an investment banker who decided pre-COVID, like he was done with the city life, bought a house in the Catskills with his family, and they live there full time. And he's this fabulous hotel, but it's very much not a Borscht Belt hotel. It's much more of like a cool Brooklynite, farm to table experience. But he was very knowledgeable about the Borscht Belt, and he pointed me in many directions to get more information and learn more about the area, and recommended books. So he felt like, even though his hotel is not a Borscht Belt hotel, and it's like probably 30 minutes from where the other hotels were, he really is sensitive to honoring the tradition of the Catskills, which I really appreciated. We went to Woodstock, which was interesting to see. Like if you saw the movie A Walk on the Moon with Diane Lane, and you see like the juxtaposition of like the hippie scene going on at the same time that like the Jewish, dating scene is happening, a stone's throw away. So we explored Woodstock, which is like, unlike the Borscht Belt, it is still there, but of course, like more just like sort of a sad aging hippie situation now, not like it's not, you don't feel the movement alive and well when you're there. And then no, there's really nothing to see in terms of the old hotels. I have my memories and I have pictures from going to Kutcher's as a child, but like there isn't, it's all gone.
So a big theme in your book is about tradition and change, and sort of the older generation really wanting to hold on to those traditions, and the younger generation in a very different place. And we see that, I don't want to give anything away sort of at the end, but the way in which that kind of evolves, and there's an honoring of that. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that struggle to both honor tradition and give it a new and help it and re-envision that tradition in a reality in which it can exist or coexist with contemporary issues.
I think the book, it was very important to me to be sensitive to the three generations and acknowledge that each of the generations had something very unique and useful to share. And so the older generation might be a little bit off the mark in terms of like how to fill all the hotel beds now, and that, people are vacationing differently now, but they were there. They built it with their hands, and they were there for decades of it thriving. And so they're not wrong that that was the formula for a very long time. And it's not necessarily better the way things are now. Of course, the middle generation is like the one I identify with the most, because I'm someone who has 3 kids that are of like a very demanding age and take up a lot of my time. But I, knock on wood, still have both my parents, and they're healthy, but they're getting older, and they, I'm the only child, and there's like, dealing with them. And so like just sort of getting squeezed. And so I would say like the middle generation in the book, I'm more sensitive to like, not so much how they feel about the hotel, but just about how like they have no bandwidth, because they're so, kind of feeling stress from both ends, and they want to please their parents and their children simultaneously. And then of course the grandchildren, who are, sort of the bridge between Gen Z and millennials, are sort of disengaged, and they don't think very much about their family history until they get there. And then all of a sudden, like the hotel might be sold, and it was something that they always took for granted. And that makes me, want to talk about meeting Bunny Grossinger's grandson, who is my age, and we met on one of my visits to Bunny's apartment. She had very devoted children and grandchildren that called and visited her constantly. She was a very special, warm person. And his name is Brandon Grossinger, and he really values having that last name. Like, it means a lot to him, even though he was like 5 when the hotel closed, so he has like only very scant memories of being there as a child, but he knows that he is part of this great family, this legacy family in history. And I see it. Like, he had, set up a charity for his in his grandmother's memory, and he's very proud and excited every time someone's like, "Oh, Grossinger, are you of the Grossinger family?" And it's very meaningful to him. And I feel like the grandchildren in my book are like, it's like you don't know what you have until it's gone, kind of, and they sort of take for granted that they're part of this legacy family until all of a sudden,
gosh,
like,
I know we have 1:30 tomorrow, but it's going to be.
Oops.
Sorry about that. I think I caught that. It's so interesting to think about that sort of the realization, partly when things change and how we adapt. And it reminds me a lot of this moment. I know you had I don't know when you completed the book as to in relation to when COVID started, but there is this sort of moment that we're experiencing. I think I see it certainly happening in the Jewish community, not just at Washington Hebrew, but in other places as well, of re-envisioning, thinking about how we do things. And in a way, this whole COVID experience has forced us all to look at life differently, and how we do things differently, and to think outside the box, which I know it was so interesting to be reading this during COVID and looking at how the grandchildren were bringing in some new ideas that were scary to the grandparents and to the original owners, and thinking about that's not how we do it, and sort of that balance that I think certainly is a Jewish tradition. I think that tension always exists in the Jewish community, but also as we embrace change and as we adapt to meet the needs of the next generation, how do we honor tradition and embrace that and bring it with us, and sometimes give it a little bit of a new wardrobe, maybe, or just use some of those traditions to bring something new to the next generation.
I think COVID, well, to answer your question, when my kids' school shut down and we left the city, I was still, finishing up the book, and it was very difficult and very stressful. And I had like 3 months to finish, and that was like a very difficult time. And I had COVID and I was really sick. So it was just like a bad time, but that's just like I'm just grateful to sort of hopefully we're on the other side of that or getting there. But I think COVID really typifies like one of the themes in the book, in that COVID represented a return to simpler times, in that we weren't running all over the place doing a million things, and suddenly you saw jigsaw puzzles were sold out and people were doing board games more than ever before, and just a lot of like quiet time. Maybe you paired up with one other family that was in your bubble, or even just your nuclear family, and you did like things you never would have done before, which is like getting creative around the house and sitting around and playing cards. But the other side of that is that the most vital thing was Zoom during COVID. And so to me, that really shows like this perfect merger of like the new and the old, because yes, there was a return to sort of like simpler fun during COVID, but people truly would have lost their minds if they hadn't been able to connect online. And so I think that really shows there's a place for everything in an ideal world. Like you have some from the past and some from the present. And they blend well. And they did, I mean, listen, nothing was perfect about COVID, and living in quarantine, but those two, those simpler pursuits, but then also relying a lot on technology, like those welded together well, to help people get through the worst of it.
For sure. Definitely. I mean, I think we learned how to use technology in ways that we could not have imagined, to bring people together, both as a community, but also to connect Jewishly and through tradition. So it really has been an amazing resource for us in so many ways. So I have a specific book question for you from one of our readers. And the question is, I was surprised Andrew turned out to be a decent guy. Was that the plan all along, or what made you decide that was going to be his path?
Oh, I don't think he was like always so terrible. He just, I think he needed to get to the hotel and see his girlfriend, his fiance, in a different light, and also like see a little bit about his own family. And I wanted Maddie to have a happy ending. So yeah, I think that he was always a decent guy with some flaws, which is like all of us.
Another question is, did you have experience with family business before writing this, and where did you get your research or your source for what that experience might be like?
I don't personally, like I didn't grow up in a family business. My husband did, and he works in his family business now. I don't know. I think maybe that informed a little bit. His family gets like, they're, knock on wood, like everyone's really, it's been great, and they get along really, really well. I hope it lasts forever. But I would say, if anything, if I took from that, watching my husband, it was like, well, did you explore anything else? Like you sort of always assumed you would go work there, but like what might have happened to you if you didn't have that business? And I feel almost like he really likes his job, so maybe it's fine. But I do sort of wonder, what paths he didn't explore. And like, luckily he's a very confident person, so he doesn't really suffer from insecurity from it. But I can imagine issues of like, you're handed a successful business, like, but then you're not the one who built it. And so like, do you feel ever like, who knows what I could have done if it was just on my own? Maybe more, maybe less. I also, when I'm with my kids, like, I don't want them to work in the family business. I mean, they're only like, my oldest child's 14. Like it's, we're a long way off, but by that point there will be so many cousins, and I just don't want like any friction. I'm a very conflict averse person, like in my life in every way. And so any path that I can choose or choose for my children that I think will avoid potential conflict is the one that I will always choose. But in terms of like having like a lot of knowledge about family business, I mean, I think a lot of it is just like being an intuitive, sensitive person. And like, I mean, part of my whole job is just imagining people's feelings and building characters. Like I have to just create this out of thin air, because after a while, like I can't just mind my own life. It's not that interesting. And as I keep writing more and more books, like I have to rely on my imagination and my just, I'm informed by other books that I read, by what I watch on TV, by having a wide circle of friends who share stories with me. Like you just living in the world, like you assimilate information and then that sparks my imagination. But, I try to not really write about my own life because it's like I write as a means of escape. Like it's very escapist for me. Like I was in a sort of a kind of a blue, sad mood the other day when I was just like staring down the barrel of Omicron and thinking about like all the things on my calendar that keep getting canceled and things I was really excited for. And I was just like feeling really blue. And then I had to write, like I had a deadline for something and I was working and I felt like an entirely new reborn person and that's because like I got to step into an imaginary world. And that would not be the case if like I had chosen to, I'm not someone who wants to like write about the bad things in my own life. Like if I had been like, let me write about Omicron and let me write about how trapped I feel and how sad I feel, like that person, like for some people that's very healing. Like for me, I would just be like, no, I'm just more depressed. Now it's like in my work and in my real life. But for me, like I escaped into working on a new novel and I like got to enter my little fantasy world where the problems were not my own. And I like that a lot.
So a somewhat related question is, you went to law school, you worked at a major firm. What inspired you to pursue writing and now make this your full-time focus? Well, full-time outside of your family as well.
I really wanted to be a writer from the time I was like 4 years old. And I've always like play dates at my house were like writing a book. Like that was the activity of a friend would come over and I had this amazing collection of Barbies. And I think that's the only reason anyone was willing to come to my house because like, I would just be like, no, we don't need to play with the Barbies. Like let's just write books. And they're like, that sounds horrible. Like, why would I, like, we're out of school. Like, why would I want to, write a book? But that was like all I wanted to do. So I was like, okay, an hour of the book and then you can see my Barbies. And I loved it. And that's really always what I wanted. I wasn't necessarily sure I wanted to be a novelist, although I was very creative as a child and did make up a lot of stories that I wrote down. But I thought I would do maybe journalism for a long time. And that's why I did the Yale Daily News. And I was editor of that. And it was really quite amazing to do that. It was like having nearly like a full-time job while I was in college. But the truth is, and I'm like a very blunt, honest person, is that I really wanted to get married. I wanted to live in New York. And like, it's not so like the New York Times wasn't like banging down my door to hire me. And I was like, I don't know that I want to go work for some like tiny paper in a smaller market where I don't know a living soul. I was like a bit trepidatious at that point in my life. And my parents, I'm from New Jersey and I'm close to my parents and I couldn't imagine like getting hired by like the Detroit Free Press and then, moving to a city where I don't know a single soul. The pay is also like really bad. So, especially in these entry level, like I always loved writing and the theme of my bat mitzvah was magazines. Like that's how much I love to write and read. But, like an entry level job was like $28,000 a year. And here I had just graduated from Yale and I sort of felt like I needed to do more. And I went to law school like as a not sure what to do next, which I think is like not that uncommon. And there was a feeling like I'll never regret having the degree. And it's getting to continue to be a student, which was great because I love academia. I went back to teach at Yale because like I'm just really enamored with academia and the like energy on college campuses. And I had 3 years at Columbia. And then I got this amazing job when I graduated that paid like multiples of what I would have made at a magazine. But I was like, totally didn't like it. Like I was so bored and I had no passion for it. And it was really like, I might as well have been a toll collector. Like that's about like the enthusiasm that I had when I went to work. I wasn't good at it. And it's not really fun to like go to work and do something that you don't really feel like you're good at. And after 3 years, I just felt dissatisfied and I was like, I'm going to do it. And I like have no regrets. I'm very lucky that this worked out because for me, it worked out. For many, it does not. So, and that doesn't mean that I'm any better. It's just like, there's a lot of luck involved in this career, I think.
Well, we are lucky to be able to have your writing and certainly to be able to share with you today. It just adds to the richness of this novel itself. But I know that so many of us are probably going to go back and look at your others. And I know I put one in the chat, but just to let everyone know, Elyssa's other books are The Floating Feldmans. There was a link to that in the chat. If you go to the link for, and I'll put that back in again, the link to Last Summer at the Golden Hotel. If you go to that link, you'll be able to find her other books as well. And that takes you through our Misfit Mall. So that will also have another, aside from supporting Elyssa and her books, also have another positive side effect as well. But the other books are The Floating Feldmans, The Intermission, Love and Miscommunication. And as you saw, Most Likely To, was the new one?
Well, that'll be out in September.
Right, that'll be September. So we'll look forward to seeing you at the Jewish Book Council again and hopefully lining something up for next year. And also the Museum of Lost Teeth, which I think will be also for many, you may want to pick up a copy of that for grandchildren. But we are so thrilled to be able to share this time with you, to have been able to share this time with you today. Really is, and to take this walk down memory lane. I know there are some more comments in the chat, and actually somebody who joined late just also mentioned and brought back all of these memories. So thank you again for bringing that, and really have enjoyed this time with you. Elyssa, do you want to add anything else before we finish?
Just thank you. I appreciate everyone who took the time to read the book, to recommend the book, buy the book, and welcoming me to your community and chatting with me today. Thank you.
But Elyssa, thank you again so much. And we hope your youngest gets to go back to school soon. May there be enough teachers for all of our children and grandchildren to be able to be back in person. May we all be in person soon. And Elyssa, we hope that next time we get to see you in person. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.